Let's start with performance off the tee. I've heard you mention how important it is to keep the ball in play. So really, what is the impact of distance and improving your strokes gained off the tee?
Distance is really important. So there's two things you can look at in amateur stats, and you can get a really good idea of the skill level of the player. And that would be how far you hit the ball, and then how many greens in regulation you hit. And just looking at those two numbers, I can give you a pretty good indication of what your skill level is in golf. So adding distance is absolutely beneficial. Sometimes there's a little bit of chicken and egg there where are longer players good because they're long, or are they long because they're good? And so improving your swing, working with a swing coach to help you improve some of that stuff is definitely can be important. And where it can be important for amateurs with distance wise is more center face contact. So if you're the kind of player that hits it all over the face and you're losing a pretty fair amount of distance by doing that. And so getting center face contact more often with good club face delivery, you don't have to speed train. You wouldn't have to work out. You'll just start hitting the ball longer through better contact. So that's one route. If you're somebody that hits it all over the face, there's probably a lot of chicken on the bone for you to get longer through better contact. If you're somebody that hits it pretty good, close to the center of the face, but you don't hit it very far, you might be someone that could go through speed training, use something like Stack System or Super Speed combined with a good workout program from somebody like Mike Carroll. He's a really well-known online coach who works with tour players and works with amateur golfers, and it has an app around that. Dedicating yourself to fitness and speed training will pay huge dividend, because as you get longer, your scores are going to drop. I've done some analysis year over year, and players that increase their year over year distance by 10 or more yards, I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say like the average improvement was almost 2 strokes. And there were like 40-ish% of players that improved by more than 3 strokes by getting longer. So there's definitely low hanging fruit there for some folks to get longer.
Yeah, speed training is amazing. I started a couple years ago. I haven't been as consistent lately. I'm going to get started with a new protocol here soon. But when I was swinging at 100 versus 110 to 112 now, it just makes such a big difference. I know there's some different stats out there, but it's like for every mile you get at least 2.5, 3 yards. That just makes such a big difference when your approach shots. You go from mid irons to wedges. And I believe you did some speed training too, right? You had a lot of improvement in your game following that and some workout training as well.
I several years ago, I first started speed training several years ago, and I was swinging 99, 100 at the time. And I got myself up to like 114, cruising at that speed. And
nice.
Speed is 100% a skill, and it's a skill that you can improve, and it's also a skill that you can lose. And so I stopped speed training as much, and my speed went down a little bit. And then last year, I had a high ankle sprain on my left side.
Oof.
And I basically lost all summer in 2023. And as I came back and was able to start swinging again, like my speed just fell off a cliff and it went down so low. So I recently started speed training again, and I see that speed coming back, but it's a huge help. And there's a lot of people listening that are probably swinging in the 93, 94, 95 range. If you can take that up to 101, 102, which is extremely achievable, like you are going to see massive gains in your game. Your scores are going to drop. It's going to be a big overnight improvement by adding that distance.
Yeah, it really is astonishing. The speed training, all the devices that are out now and the programs, it makes such a big difference. And it's so much more attainable than, trying to get a six pack or get, in super good shape. That's going to take 6 months, a year. Like you can see results of speed training in like 8, 12 weeks,
right?
When you're consistent, which is key. Yep. One thing too, I get a lot of pushback on with people when I tell them, hey, start speed training, is like, oh, I'm worried I'm going to hit it all over the place. I actually experienced the exact opposite. When I started swinging faster, I started hitting it straighter. What's your take on that, or what was your experience like?
Yeah, I don't have a take on that. I actually have data on that. So I
Perfect.
did when I did the analysis with Arccos to see players that gain distance. Players that gain distance, they were more likely to get straighter. They didn't, and they didn't. There were very, very few players that got significantly wilder off the tee. So it's a huge misconception. And I did the same thing on the PGA Tour. So we have data going back to 1983, and I looked at the 200 players on the PGA Tour that had the biggest year-over-year gain in distance. And I removed people during the Pro V1 years, like when they switched to Pro V1 and they gained a pretty fair amount of distance overnight. I removed those players, and I removed players for injury when there was really well-known players that had injury. Um, and what was left over was players did not get any wilder off the tee when they added distance. They maintained the same level of accuracy that they had when they were shorter. So adding speed, statistically, you are very, very unlikely to get crazy wild off the tee. You definitely want to hit driver as much as you can. Like everything else in golf, it's pretty individualized. I've done a few deeper dives on driver versus 3-wood, and there are some players that do see a decent uptick in accuracy. But for the most part, you need a really good reason to not hit driver. I've also done a little bit of research. It's not in depth, but and it's more anecdotal than it is study. But I know a lot of players that have shortened the shaft in their driver. These are amateur players, and they've gone from the typical 45 and a half, 46-inch shaft that you'll get from a lot of clubs that you purchase, and they've reduced that by 2, 3, 3.5 inches. Gone down to a 42 and a half, 43-inch shaft in their driver, and they've seen a huge improvement in the quality of their strike. The shorter the shaft gets, the easier it is to put the ball somewhere near the center of the face. And I have a number of people that have done sort of before and after with data with their longer shaft and their shorter shaft. And what was fascinating is overall their average doesn't get lower. And if it does, it gets like a yard or two shorter. I know you're probably
Interesting.
thinking like, well, you just told me I need to add distance. And now you're telling me, get a shorter shaft and you're going to get shorter.
Right.
But if you go back to 15 minutes ago, we talked about penalty strokes, and penalty strokes are huge for amateurs. And keeping the ball in play is extremely important. And players that switch to a much shorter shaft in their driver, and I probably have data on probably 20, 25 players. Almost all of them got materially more accurate with their driver. And they kept it in play a whole lot more compared to their longer shaft. And so it's definitely something that I think some players, if you're really, really bad with the driver and you hit it all over the face and you hit a lot of balls OB, it would be something I would experiment with. I wouldn't just go out in your garage and take a hacksaw and lop 3 inches off your driver. Find a good fitter, because there's some other adjustments that they would make to the club to make sure swing weight doesn't change drastically. But I would investigate that as an option and see how that works for you. And that's one of the key things about golf is everybody's different. Everybody has a different blueprint. There's no one size fits all for any of this. So generally we can tell you what you should be doing, driver versus 3-wood, but some people that doesn't apply to. So understanding your numbers is really important. But to kind of close this out, I would say you need a really good reason to not hit driver. So the default is definitely to pull that club.